All right, we're back. So now it's time for the story of Pesh. Now, I have like 10 questions to ask. Akim, go ahead. You ask your first question, and I will see if that question is one of mine. But
yeah, I mean, more or less the same thing. You said you moved on. You was doing Salesforce consulting and stuff like that. So. Some people, once they move beyond Trinidad, they don't really look back, So what kind of inspired you and what brought about, that urge and that? Cause I mean, it's a big problem to tackle in Trinidad, being that, e-money adoption or digital adoption, even people doing online payments or having bank accounts, is a big hurdle in terms of Trinidad. So what inspired you to really try and tackle that problem and to push through it, why, I know question it and I grateful that, somebody, still, they want to make things happen in Trinidad, but, what was the reason and the drive and, for you, pursuing Pesh in Trinidad, the genesis of it?
Yeah. There's a few, I would say there's a few things, one is like, I would come back to Trinidad like fairly frequent, so it's not like I flew out and come back like in 5 years or, there was never, every year I would be back home for a visit, wedding, Christmas, whatever reason. So I've never not had that connection, even though I've been, outside of Trinidad for a long time. I'm still very connected. But I think for me, it was when I traveled, I went to India for a project, and I was like in 2018 or so, and for like a business travel. And I saw people buying just street food with their phones, So like some people were using cash, but people just paying with their phone. And I was like, you buying the equivalent of doubles. You're buying dal and rice, you're buying street food with your phone. And then I was like, why we can't do that in Trinidad? Like a lot of times you travel around and you just go to somewhere else and you're just like, why we can't have that in Trinidad, boy? And that was sort of like the driving fact, the driving thing of like, now, I have the idea of like, what could I do to give back? And that sort of gave me the drive of my vision at some point is that you could go to a doubles vendor and pay with your phone, right? Just tap to pay or pull out the thing and be like, whoever doubles and just pay them. And I was back in 2018. And I'm just kind of one of those guys who, once I see a problem, I just have like, it just nags me until there's a solution, So I was like, well, who's going to solve this? And I was like, well, I could do that. I do this for other people. Like, why can't I do that for Trinidad? Like, it can't be that hard. And I was like, the worst words I ever said, right?
Okay.
But that's always been my attitude.
So
to my detriment,
So when we write the book, right, we're going to write the book and say, one day I traveled to Mumbai and I saw somebody buying dal and rice, and I was like, I want to buy dal and rice with my phone too, aka doubles, dal and bara.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so that's it. That was the inspiration, right? Now,
yeah.
Inspiration is a weird thing because you see a problem and you say to yourself, I think I could solve that. Probably because you saw somebody else do it. So it kind of reminds me of me and jumping off waterfalls, right? So I like to hike real plenty. And whenever I go to a hike and there's a waterfall that people say you could jump off, I will not be the first person to jump off the waterfall. I will watch somebody else jump watch our next person jump and be like, okay, that person is about my height, my build, my age, or whatnot. If they could do it, I could do it too. So then I climb up the waterfall. And the first time I ever had to jump off a waterfall, I questioned my stupidity. I was like, are you really stupid or? Like, look at me standing up over this body of water, probably about 20 to 30 feet below me. Just because I saw somebody else do it, I gonna try to do it too? Am I dumb? Did I have overconfidence or something like that? So I jump into the waterfall, and since then it's gotten a lot easier because now you know, okay, it could be done. You just had to overcome the initial feeling, right? So let's go through the first 6 months of you taking on this project, because in that first 6 months is where you decide I done, or okay, I think I know where the roadmap is. I just need to stick it through. So let me hear the 6 months from a technical perspective. I can remember our audience is they know stuff about stuff.
Yeah. So it was.
Before that, you don't have to give away any trade secrets, but if you do give away any, I know you're smart enough not to do that. So go ahead.
No. There's, I would say, it's one of those things where I was like, okay, well, this is the problem, right? So, what's your problem statement, right? So like, I want to send my mother $20 with my phone, right? So how do I do that? And then from a technology perspective, I think for the listeners out there, it's like, okay, well, you can build a tool, right? But in order for you to be able to launch it, you have to have like the different licenses or the permissions
integrations
to do that, the integrations, right?
Yeah.
So if you are building, like in our case, it was like kind of setting individual milestones. And that's kind of what got me through the first 6 months. It was like, all right, I want to build this application. I'm very good at the front end kind of development side of it. I need a back end person, right? So it would have been like, hey, Andre, you like the back end, I like the front end. Let's team up and build the application, right? So the developers that I work with kind of have that back and forth. It's like, all right, I need an API to do this. I need a function to do this. I will make it look beautiful and make it work well. But you build out the back end, right? You build out the initial model,
the database and the API calls and those sort of things,
and all of that sort of stuff, right? So there's a lot of that back end developer, front end developer kind of working. Right. Figuring out the frameworks that we're going to use, the database structure, encryption, secure connections, all of that. And then
what framework? Sorry, if I could ask that.
Oh, and the front end framework.
Yeah.
No, it's Ionic.
Ionic, okay. Ionic. I thought it was Flask or Angular. Well, I don't know.
Oh yeah, Ionic is kind of built on top of Angular. Well, I mean, it could speak to Angular and React and all of these sort of things. But I liked, and that's one of the things, for the tech listeners, it's like you wanna select a framework that really kind of fits how you want your application to work, that's well supported, well documented, has the components that you need,
Documentation, oh boy. Stack Overflow. Sorry.
Like it has to, you have to do a lot of research and you have to break some things, Right. So the first 6 months was identifying like what the technical framework would look like, put in like what APIs we're going to use, what backend services we're going to use, and kind of stitching all of that together. And while that was being done, I was in Figma, kind of putting the overall like workflow and all that.
Oh wait, you're a Figma user? I thought you would be like Illustrator, Adobe kind of guy.
Well,
Adobe ended up trying to buy. They tried to buy over Figma, but I mean,
I use Figma a lot. Figma is great for wireframing and as I'm looking at features like to build, I'll build it out in Figma first. Even today, I'll be like,
all right.
I want this, and I'll sketch it out in there, and then I'll figure out, So that's kind of the design process. But
all right, okay.
But the technology side, I would say, the tech side of it was the easier part in that the tools already kind of exist, right? You want to spin up AWS, that's there. Or you want to spin up Google, that's there. You just need an email address and you can like spin up these tools. But it's showing the regulators that you've kind of covered all your bases, and that back and forth, that took a long time, because they're very thorough, especially the central bank, because if you think about it, you're building, like Pesh is an app, it connects to your bank account. So you need regulatory approval, and without that regulatory approval, you can't really move forward. So it was a lot of that, back and forth of showing them the tool that we built, the structure that we built, is secure, makes sense.
Our real questions popping up right now. So, did you speak to somebody who is conversant with technology, or you spoke to somebody who's conversant with accounts and business and finance? Because sometimes when you're building things and you talk to somebody and you're like, oh yeah, so the API does this, and they're like, the AP what? And you're like, oh wait, you don't know about technology, so that means I have to translate what I'm saying for you to understand. Don't call any names, but just kind of run through that process of the integrations and the regulatory approval.
I would say I didn't have that experience. The technology people that had to kind of sign off on Pesh. And this is just, mind you, this was just to get the provisional approval, like, to then move forward to do all of the other things. That they knew what they were talking about.
Okay. See, that gives me hope. Me hope.
Yeah. No, they knew what they were talking about, but it's not just the technology side, but do you have your user policies in place, like your privacy policies, all of those things outside of the application? Like, is this a full-on service that's baked? So like when you go to peshmoney.com, you could see all of our privacy policies, the user policies, all of that stuff is all kind of covered, so they're looking at you as an overall service,
And I guess too, in terms of security, you would have had to meet certain compliance regulations. Were they also interested in security?
Oh, very, very.
Yeah.
That was like one of the biggest things, was how secure is this, So, we had to make sure the app, had penetration tested and all of that stuff. Stuff that, your audience will be like, well, I assume that, they tested. Yeah. But you have to like show like, hey, we tested it, we put it through the ringer, those types of things.